the call. So I see a handful of folks using their computers, and then it looks like maybe a few others are using their phones. So let's maybe go ahead and do roll call just so we know who's here. Not anything too extreme, just maybe name, agency that you're with, your title, and then if your title isn't an obvious indicator of what your job responsibilities are, maybe sharing a little bit about your primary responsibilities. So let's start with, we'll start with Val.
Hello, I'm Val Maximovich. I'm an Independence Community Schools Volunteer and Mentor Coordinator.
Great, thank you, Val. And then Sarah Walker.
Hey, Sarah Walker, Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Mississippi Valley. I am the Senior Director of Enrollment and Community Partnerships, so oversee our volunteer enrollment and a lot of our recruitment efforts.
Great, and then Lynn Carroll.
The Executive Director for Heart of Iowa Big Brothers Big Sisters, serving Marshall County and Poweshiek County.
Nice. So as Executive Director, you do it all, right? You oversee your program, grants, events. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Just for
all
context.
Kinds of stuff. Every day is.
Yeah. Great. Some of our questions that you'll find out in a bit are program centered, and some are operations and events. So, and then another caller. I apologize if I don't say your name correctly, but Isla. Oh, she's muted. Self-muted. So if she would like to introduce herself, she can. And then if anyone's just calling in straight from the phone, if there's anyone else on the call. All right. Well, let's get started. So this is being recorded, which is great. Some people have sent questions and they knew they couldn't come today. So they're really looking forward to hearing the recording and listening to how we would approach it. So again, like I mentioned, some questions are program-centered, some are operational or about fundraising events. So this is definitely an interactive call. I'm hoping that everyone will consider weighing in. I think that would be great for the folks that submitted the questions so they have a couple of different perspectives. So our first question is related to, I know the context was match support, but I guess it could also be enrollment too. So what do you do when the other party does not return your calls or communicate with you? So you've left, a few messages, maybe you've tried the mail, and just nothing. What would you guys do in that scenario? Sarah Walker, what would you do?
I was just going to say, not all of us. So this is in an active match, right? Is the context?
Yeah, we'll ask it that way, and then if there's another example that would be helpful for this person, then we can. Yeah, but let's talk about like active match. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on which party is not responding. We tend to be a little bit more forgiving if it's the parent that we're having a hard time getting a hold of, just because we know there are many more barriers to communicating with our parents. If it's a volunteer that is not communicating with us, we're more likely to send a message, or usually all three, regular mail and by phone, saying you need to contact us by this date or you are in jeopardy of having your match close, and just giving a specific deadline, usually within about 10 days or 2 weeks, to see if we can prompt them to call and reach out to us that way. If it's a parent, and especially if they have been consistent in the past, or if they haven't been and we just know that it's always a struggle to get hold of them, then we will usually be a little more lenient and give a few more tries, maybe reach out through the school and send a note home with the child, try alternate contacts, and pretty much whoever we have on file that we could potentially get a message to the parent that way.
Great, thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Lynn, you have any thoughts?
This is Lynn Carroll. We do very much the same kinds of things. We have gone as far as to actually go and find and knock on their door, but it's just a requirement that a part of their contract, when they first said yes, we'll be a part of this, that they need to be responding to match support. So We have sent the letter that says you have 10 days to respond because it's required to be a part of this program, or we will close the match. And sometimes it's the parents that they just need that little urging on and reminder that this is their part of their agreement. So very much similar what they do, what Sarah does.
Great. Val, how about you? Val self-muted. I'll start talking and then Val wants to contribute. So at Big Brothers Big Sisters, we give them 3 opportunities to call us back. We still keep trying to do their support, but after the 3rd time, we send them the letter. In New Hampshire, we actually sent a postcard instead. Our rationale was it's sometimes hard to open a letter, whereas a postcard, it's like the information, the message is right there. You can't ignore it. Also, if they're avoiding you and they see the return address on an envelope, they're probably going to pitch it. So we have tried a couple of different methods. But at my agency currently in Northeast Iowa, we still use the letter. That seems to work. We do say that I don't know exactly how many days we give. Our program director is supposed to join the call, so we can backtrack to her and she can fill that in. But it's pretty firm. Like, it's not light and fluffy. It's, hey, you agree to this, kind of what Lynn just said. You know, give us a call or else your match will be closed. We don't say your match might be closed. We say it will, and that usually lights the fire. We've never really found that once a match gets a letter that they get themselves in a position where it happens again. After that, they are a better communicator. They will actually tell us if they're going away on vacation, even if they're quarterly contact at that point, and we don't actually need to call them that month. They'll still let us know that they're going to be out of touch. So it's just really interesting, you know, what one letter can do if it's taken seriously. But yeah, like everyone else, like Sarah and Lynn, we also refer it back to the contract. All right. I see Laura is signing in right now, but she doesn't have audio yet, so we'll get back to that question if you guys want. Other thoughts before we move on to the next question?
This is Val again, and I did close a match, and I think my biggest concern is that if they're continuing to meet but they're not communicating with me, there's a safety issue. So I feel that I have to let the parents know that if they're continuing to meet, the match has been officially closed as of this date. Because if the mental
I see what you mean. Yeah.
I think we're done. And I need the parent to know that as well.
Yeah, I think that sounds appropriate. We do that. We make it really clear. So after the match closes, we send another letter. Our closure process is, if we can, we'll have an in-person match graduation. We try to use graduation instead of closure meeting. But if it's impossible because we can't get in hold of a party, then we'll send a letter that clearly states that if you choose to continue to stay in touch or meet in any way, it's outside of the purview and scope of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and that we're not held liable if something were to happen going forward. It's all on you. So yeah, I think that's really important. Yep.
Okay.
Other thoughts about this question? I liked this question because I think all mentoring agencies have this issue. If we didn't, then there'd probably be a bigger problem. You know, people are calling us back all the time because they're trying to get away with stuff and hoping we'll never find out or something like that. So, you know, life happens. People forget to call. So, yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one then. So the next one, what do you do when the prospective mentor is not a good candidate for mentoring and they are not accepting that rejection? So what do you guys do when there's a mentor in your enrollment process who just isn't a good fit, happens to all of us again, but when you tell them that they are not able to be matched at this time for whatever reason your agency uses and they're just not accepting, how would you guys move forward with that? Handling that, managing that prospect volunteer. How about Lynn? We'll have you go first. What would you do?
Well, we've had that happen, and often if you that's usually after you kind of trust the process, and at some point, you know, the interview process, the references, all those things, If you still don't feel as though this is a good fit for you.
Okay.
Was the question about
go ahead, Lynn.
somebody who was already matched? I'm sorry. Would you read the question again, making sure was it about those who are already matched with the child?
No, it's somebody that you've interviewed, they're not a good fit, or maybe they've already gone through the orientation and you've just gotten a background check back or did a reference and it's clear that they're not a good fit for your program. And then you tell them that they're not able to be matched, and then they don't accept that. How do you handle that situation?
Okay. I just had somebody come in a couple weeks ago that wanted to volunteer, and I had some red flags right away just having a conversation with this person. And then he asked if he could give me a hug before he left.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, he has some problems with personal space. So I gave him an application. I said, what was your name again? And I wrote it down on a piece of paper with a great big, and drew a big red flag on there, because when that application comes in, we really need to be paying attention to that. This is one person that we don't think is probably going to work out, period, because he's got space issues, personal space issues. And if he's all huggy and somebody he just met, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for being matched with a boy. So you kind of have to use, you know, I haven't received an application yet back. It's possible, but he may not even turn it back in. So that's been our latest fun.
Okay. I see that our program director, Laura, has joined the call. Laura, are you able to hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep, can hear you. Laura and I are in different offices today, that's why. So, Laura, the question, and this is something that we've dealt with more now over the past year because our agency is in a growth pattern, and so just by default, we're getting more mentors through the enrollment process. We're rejecting a lot more than our agency's ever been used to. So, yeah. Laura, the question was, if you have a volunteer that's applying to be a mentor, they're not a good fit for whatever reason, could be the interview, could be a reference or a few, or background check or anything. Orientation, they're just exposed way more than you thought, which is why we do, you know, group orientations, most of us. So you tell them no, that they're not a good fit, and then they just don't accept, you know, your feedback. How have you been handling it?
That's a good question. I think it's different for everybody and what the situation is, I guess. I know that here we really try not to give them specific reasons why. I mean, we might say general statements like you're just not a good fit for the program, or this might not be the right time for you to be a mentor with us. But we don't get into specifics like, you know, you were inappropriate during your interview, or we found stuff on your background checks. We try and keep like less information, and we kind of explain that to them. And then we also remind them that when they sign the application that they're signing off on us not telling them the reason why they're not accepted in our program. And I'm assuming this question is before we actually match them with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's really tough, and a lot of times Katie Orlando is like our go-to person for like talking to people about, because she's kind of removed from the situation. She wasn't the one that interviewed them, because we don't want it to be like in a personal thing with the person that was doing their enrollment. But we just try not to give them too much information. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that does. So I come from a long line, and I know not all Big Brothers Big Sisters agencies even do this, never mind the other mentoring agencies in Iowa, but my belief is the less you give somebody, the less information you give somebody, the harder it is for them to come back and just disagree. We had an example last summer. A mentor came into our office, a prospective mentor came into interview, and the staff member that interviewed him was really green, so you know, she should have ended the interview a lot earlier than she did. She did the full interview. So if a mentor, a prospect comes to us and clearly is not a good fit during the interview, they tell us, oh, I've, you know, been arrested 3 times in my life for manslaughter. You know, that's not something that we can work with. So unfortunately, that wasn't the example in this case, but it was something like that. And then he also, like Lynn's example, had really big boundary issues. He like kept touching her knee, if I remember correctly, and the staff member felt so uncomfortable she didn't even close the interview door, so that should have been the indicator. She kept it open. So should she have cut the interview off before it ended and he went on his way? Yes, but it didn't happen in that scenario. So then I got the volunteer, because I send out all the no letters for all the staff, and sent him one, nothing, no reason given. He called back, I think, maybe 10 times. I returned his call once and just, that's it. I explained myself. I'm not telling you anything else. But he was accusing us of discriminating. He just, he happened to be in a wheelchair, so discrimination. And then he accused us of, I don't even remember what else. It was just a list every time he called. But there was no foundation there because we never told him anything. And he said he got his attorney involved, which never actually came true. I find that if people threaten to get their attorneys involved, it's never really going to happen if you do this right. So I never, if somebody calls back in anger after they receive my letter, if I'm in the office, I never take the call. I always let it go to voicemail. And I think this is a good practice for any angry phone call that anyone ever gets. Never answer that phone call. Just let it go to your message. Call back in a few hours or the next day if that's appropriate. Let the person calm down. The person is usually never as heated as in the moment that they are, and that's really helped me. Recently, we rejected a volunteer who's very well known in the Cedar Falls community, and everyone, I think, was a little shocked that we didn't accept this person. We didn't tell them. She spread it around. But she wasn't. She knew why. But at first when she called back, when she got the letter, she left, a pretty entitled message. It's my right to mentor. I'm like a great influence on the community. But she knew that some of the answers she gave in the interview were not a good fit for us. And I didn't have to say anything. She got to that on her own. So just a nice calm phone call the next day really resolved that. And now she's a donor for our agency. So I think, you just got to pace yourself. You got to remain calm. You can't budge. If it's up to you if your agency has a practice where you tell the mentor the reason why you're not accepting them. But my experience has been it's easier when you don't. The one time that I slipped and did tell the mentor, and Laura was actually in the room because we were both listening to the call, that was the worst situation for me professionally because he knew that it was his background check and just hung on to that even though that wasn't the only reason why. So it just created some other issues that were harder for me to handle. They're handled now, but I hate work. So the easier I can do things, the better. So what do you guys think? Any other thoughts about that question?
Our process is very similar to that, Katie. We have a standard letter that goes out with my name on it, regardless of who did the interview. If it is somebody who does seem like they would be particularly challenging or not accepting of the generic letter, I make sure all of our office staff know that if this person calls in, transfer them to my voicemail so that we can be consistent with the communication and just stick with, our standard answer is you're not a good fit for our mentoring program. There might be other volunteer opportunities for you, but this isn't the right one. And we just keep reiterating that every time they argue with us. And same thing, we've had people who threaten to get lawyers involved, but that has never come to fruition. So just being consistent with the message and trying to make it as few people as possible who are talking and dealing with that person.
I think the one other thing, I've had the situation, I was one that asked the question, this is Val, and I think the worst of it for me is that he's in a lot of organizations in independence, and he's constantly saying, well, they don't want me. They say they want mentors, but they don't want me. So I'm hoping that people hear him say that, they're thinking, well, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think if you're doing a great job spreading your brand, they know, like, whenever I speak or talk to our donors, it's in our grant, like, we do 18 layers of background check. I'm counting every single reference as one. But we do 8 in the interview and the orientation. We do 18 layers of background checks. So if you're not being accepted to be a mentor, everyone knows that we have 50-plus kids waiting. So if we're not picking you, wow, what should we know about you?
Right.
So, but that's if you're doing a great job with your brand. If people in your community don't know this, then of course they're going to jump to, well, I guess they don't need, they don't need mentors anymore. So, yeah, it's just one of those things that's, reinforces why it's important for you to do a great job spreading awareness of your program and your impact. So,
definitely.
Hey, This is Mary. I just, you said that one person said they have a right to mentor, and, just to remind you guys know that no one has a right to volunteer with your program. I mean, and I do like that practice of even putting that on the application, that if you are rejected, that, we are not required to provide a reason why for you. Just put that up front. It doesn't mean that's going to stop everyone from being upset, but they don't have a right to volunteer in your program any more than anyone has a right to work at your agency either. So.
Yeah.
Correct. All right. Well, let's keep moving. We could probably talk about those first few questions all day, but let's jump to the next one. How do you make it feel good when you let go of an employee who's dealing with a lot personally and they're not doing their job? So an HR question for those who work with other staff or maybe have worked with other staff in the past. So again, how do you make it feel good when you let go of an employee who is dealing with a lot personally and they're not doing their job? Not all at once. Let's see, who can go first this time? I would call on Isla, but I think she's still self-muted. So how about, I know, Sarah, you work with a lot of staff. You have a lot of AmeriCorps members. Have you ever run into this scenario before?
We have, yeah, not so much with staff, but definitely with AmeriCorps. It's interesting because the times that it's happened, it's not a surprise when we have to have that conversation with the AmeriCorps member that, based on what your contract requires and what the responsibilities of this service is, it seems like this has really been a struggle for you, and I don't think this is the best, kind of the same thing. It's not really the best fit for you at this time. And when we've had to have that, very rarely is anybody surprised. And a couple of times they've actually been very relieved because, they felt the same way, but they were scared about having that conversation or wanting to end their contract early. And we don't want to do it, and we try to do whatever we can to make it work. But usually they're pretty aware that this has been a struggle, and and we have to have that conversation. Sometimes they even bring it up themselves. I had one AmeriCorps volunteer whose husband was very, very sick, and it was really just unrealistic that she would be able to continue her contract. So just being straightforward, talking about the positive components that they have contributed, and just being factual. It's been difficult for you to maintain the quality of work that we need, and this isn't working. So that's how we've handled it.
Great. I like that it wasn't a surprise for people. I think sometimes in the human services field, when we have to let an employee go, we internalize it a lot more than the employee actually does. Can anyone relate with that? I know Laura can. Like, we actually feel worse about letting them go than they feel about being in the position of being let go.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts around that one? All right, well, the next question is a little bit similar. So instead of letting an employee go who is going through a lot personally and is just, you just are feeling badly, they're dealing with loss or just changing their life, the next one is, what do you do? Oops, sorry, I lost it. What are some tips you try to help a mediocre staff member improve who is only working at your agency for the paycheck and has no sense of agency pride? That's my favorite question. So who wants to answer that one? Lynn, how would you respond to that one?
That's kind of sad. I guess I feel as though it takes a little bit of time for them to really kind of find that passion for being a part of the program, but I don't know how you specifically change their ideas except for tell them those stories of success and why it is that you're passionate about what you do. The success stories often will help people to understand why this is so important.
Any other thoughts? Do you have any people on your staff right now who are just, it's a paycheck job? We do. I'll admit that. It's not ideal, but you don't realize that at the time of the interview. And if they're doing okay, if they're reaching some goals, we've had a hard time moving forward if they are performing. So Val, what are your thoughts about that one?
I was just going to say I feel that Am I unmuted? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I think one of the things we see as a school staff is that if you're a part of a planning team,
I'm glad you said bye. Yes, it is. Yes.
Can you hear
Sorry,
me?
guys. I have someone in the office. I didn't hear that last one. Could you repeat the last sentence?
Sure. As a school staff, I think one thing we notice is if you're involved with something, like you're on a planning committee or you're part of a curriculum planning team or something, it makes you feel like you have more ownership. And sometimes if you just turn to that person and say, so what do you think about this? They start feeling some of that pride that those of us that have been here 15 years feel over those newbies, you know? So sometimes it just helps them to get involved so they feel the pride that the rest of us already have.
Great, that's a really good tip. Laura, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of, to go off of what Lynn had said earlier, I'm starting to think more about when I'm teaching people about the job and how to do everything, to not just focus so much on how to do everything, but why we do everything. Sometimes we get so caught up in teaching, you know, our staff each step that you take in like the enrollment process and match support and all of that, that we kind of forget why everything is in place the way it is. So kind of letting them know what the purpose is for the work that we do, why we, you know, have a mentoring program. Hopefully they'll kind of see how important it is and how big of an impact it can have on other people. And if they're in this line of work, you would hope that that would make them somewhat passionate, I guess.
Back down to Waterloo yesterday, so I can bring them. I can. Hey, Mary, I know that you've worked with a lot of staff before. What would you do in this scenario? But I can bring that back down to Waterloo, and then we'll have.
Well, I think a little bit similar to what Val was saying too. Is just find ways to engage that they they do really start to feel.
Registration starts.
Yes.
To feel the mission of what your program is too. So, yeah, I just ways that they engage, so they really feel like they understand what's going on in different aspects of the program too. But I do like the stories too, and just so they get impact, and so they're not bogged down in just what their work is, but can see the bigger picture too. It's hard to make other people care, though. I mean, at some point there's only so much that you can do too, and at some point you might have to just admit it's not really that great a fit.
Yep, amen to that. All right, so we have one of our participants. Is it Ayla? I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name?
It's okay. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Okay, it's Ayla.
Ayla, what agency are you with?
I'm with the Greatest Big Sisters of Central Iowa.
Oh, that's great. And what is your role there?
So I'm actually not a program manager or anything like that. I do child enrollment and match support and community-based.
Perfect. Okay. Have you ever been in the supervision role? Do you have any thoughts about the question we're on right now?
I didn't. I'm sorry. I was on the phone that whole time with a parent, and so I didn't know.
Hey, that's okay.
Okay.
Hey, that's our. The question was, if you have a mediocre staff person that you're working with who is just like a paycheck job for them, how do you work with them to try to improve their performance?
Oh.
Like they're doing some things all right, but not enough to be fired yet per se. So even if you haven't supervised somebody, even if in a peer setting, like I know that's probably as equally as frustrating having a peer. You're getting paid the same, but you're clearly a top performer and they're not. So
yeah, absolutely. I have that situation right now, and we actually talked with the supervisor about it. So
what are some steps that you guys have tried?
Sorry, I can't speak about it right now, actually. Okay.
Well, we will move on to the next question. Does anyone else have any closing thoughts about this current question? I think you guys came up with really good responses. And apologies for being a little distracted on that question too. We have a 5K event tomorrow, and our registration was yesterday, and people keep stopping by because I don't know why, but it's okay. It'll be fine. So our next question is, let's see. A lot of these questions are about fundraisers. I'm going to try to find another one about programming, since I think the majority of us on the call are program-centered. So this one might be a little easy to answer, but let's do this. What background screening vendors does your agency use? Or background, vendor, or I guess process, if you don't necessarily use a vendor. Who would like to answer that one first?
I can. This is Sarah.
Okay.
System is the Valley. We use First Advantage or LexisNexis for our Department of Motor Vehicle check, and we actually use Presidium, which has been in place for quite a few years. I'm actually looking at potentially switching that, but right now we're using Presidium for our federal background check, criminal background check.
Perfect. Great. Laura, what does your agency use?
We use IntelliCore for our criminal background check, and then we do the state driving check. We do the National Sex Offender Registry. We do Department of Human Services for the child abuse check. Let's see. Then we do references, interview. Am I missing something, Katie?
No, I think that's good. The DMV check that we do is free through the state, correct?
Yes.
And it covers all states? That's the one that we use.
Yes.
Let's see.
It's the Iowa.
Covers Iowa, yeah.
Department of Transportation. Yeah.
That one. Yeah. Lynn, what do you use at Heart of Iowa? Big Brothers Big Sisters.
We actually do not use any kind of service for ours. Our office assistant files all of our background checks. We do provide, ask for 3 references from each for personal references, and if they've been volunteering with any other child agency before this, ask for a reference from there. But including our interview process, we also do state DCI. We do the sex offender registry, the child abuse registry, the National Sex Offender Registry, we do the Iowa Department of Transportation. We also do, there's local police as well as the state level. And then we're also doing a little bit of social media check as well. I think I got them all.
Yeah. Sounds good. Anybody else? Val, what are you guys doing over there at the Independent School District? What do you guys use?
Before that, who was speaking before you?
That was Lynn. Lynn Carroll.
Okay. We use SING, which is a single contact license and background check through the state. That covers sex offender, child abuse, and dependent adult abuse. We also use DHS, Buchanan County Sheriff. I like the social media idea. We don't use that. I think and the National Sex Offender Registry.
Great. Yeah, the social media checks, they're kind of interesting. We actually, I think maybe twice, Laura, maybe, we had a couple of volunteers that were a little gray for us in their interview, but nothing enough that would push them over. Like they weren't a maybe, they were still a yes. But then when we did their social media check, it was a quick no. So it actually has helped us, mostly with like the younger, specifically you and I students who haven't learned how to filter themselves on specifically Twitter. So that's what. Okay. Any other thoughts about that one? All right. Another question. What companies are the best sources for mentors in your area? So does anyone have a sweet spot for like a recruiting source from a company?
I wish
Oh, I don't know who that was.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. This is Lynn, and I wish I did. I have a funny story about how I decided I was wanting to recruit. We just had interviewed a little guy who's 12 and who wanted to have a big brother who could rap. And so I decided to be creative and came up with a little rap of my own and put it on our Facebook page to see if anybody would respond. Well, I didn't get a whole bunch of likes to that, so because I do realize it was bad rapping. It was good Dr. Susie Rhymey stuff. That was what was good about it. But we did get a phone call, and the phone call was, "This is so-and-so, I'm such and this old, and I had 3 people recommend that I call you because of what you had posted on Facebook about needing somebody who raps, and I rap, And then he goes on and he talks about how he's currently on parole and has been in prison 3 times. It's like, oh, no, we can't even talk to you. I mean, we can't do anything with that, you know. But I got some response at least. And that was my, I think sometimes coming up with an out-of-the-ordinary way to reach out to people. That one was my tops of the most out of the ordinary. Another thing we do is we've been providing what we call cookie breaks, contacting some smaller businesses, you know, some of the local banks, some of the local realtor offices, the smaller office areas, and then we take cookies and tell them about Big Brothers Big Sisters and invite them to sign up, and we've had a little bit of positive response from that. And it's just not nearly as enough as from what we could use, but it has been a good positive thing. And you're actually talking to people in smaller environments and giving them a chance to ask more questions. So it's all good. That was probably our best one that we like to do.
When you do those, Lynn, when you do those, this is Sarah, do you just set a specific time, like we'll be here from 10 to noon or whatever, and then just kind of have it as open for people to come in?
Usually they have it when they've got maybe some sort of staff meeting, and they just have to come in, and that works out well, because then you're focused, you know, 20 minutes, half hour, whatever. But I go to Fairway and buy those already frozen cookies that all you have to do is bake them. And I usually get chocolate chip, and then I put them in those CD sleeves with a sticker that has our contact information on it. And so everybody gets one they can take back to their desk. The information's right there for getting in contact with us. And it's just a way for, you know, it's giving them all a treat. They don't have to eat right then.
Nice.
But that's the deal.
I like it. Okay, great.
Nice. Laura, who would you say are the companies that are our sweet spot for recruiting mentors?
Well, first, I just want to say, Lynn, I loved that video. I thought it was hilarious and creative, and we shared it on our Facebook page. I watched it like 5 times. I thought it was great. So
it's
kudos to you for sure. For us, well, here in Waterloo, we do have several that are big supporters. I find that once you get like 1 or 2 people to be a mentor at a place, it spreads. So like, for instance, our Big of the Year this last year is a well-known lawyer in the community. And once we recognized him, and he truly deserves it. I mean, he's been doing it for, I think it's been 5 years now he's been matched with his little. But once we recognize him as Big of the Year, now we've gotten all these other, you know, staff from his law office that have applied to be bigs, and the ones that we've had come through have been phenomenal. So that's been good. Banks are a great one. So like Veridian, UICCU, usually they're pretty supportive, and sometimes they'll actually let their employees leave during the lunch hour to go mentor a little, and it counts as work time once a week. And so that's a great incentive to get, you know, staff to volunteer. I know CUNA Mutual and Waverly is a big supporter of us, and we're actually going to start doing workplace mentoring with them. John Deere is a good one for us as well. They do a Dollars for Doers program where they actually donate $1,000 to us every time one of our mentors clocks 40 hours of volunteer service with us. So that's really helpful. Am I leaving any out, Katie? Might be.
Yeah, I mean, like just banks, like not even like the large ones like you mentioned, like just like smaller ones too. I think banks and credit unions really push their employees, and you guys probably already know this, but they push their employees to get involved. So it makes it so much easier when you approach somebody that works for one of them. They already know that that's one of the things they're going to be evaluated on, either at their annual performance review or some other time. So if it's not a board position that you're offering, then mentoring I think is still a good thing. But yeah, how about anyone else that hasn't? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, now that we have offices in smaller communities, we've kind of looked to the banks to help us recruit mentors. So.
Yeah, and school districts have been pretty good in those small communities too. Like the teachers will, even though they're working during the day, they'll take their study and mentor a child. We also just recently on May 8th, we had a really good recruiting day in Oline where we sent 5 of our staff to the streets, pounding the pavement, going to every business, trying to recruit mentors, either on the spot if that felt appropriate, or arranging a time where we could come back and talk to their staff. So I think we received probably around 20 like actual mentors who are really interested, and we're going to start the interview process with them. And then we had another 4 or 5 businesses that we were going to go back and do a staff presentation to. We're pretty confident we'll get at least 1 or 2 from there. We had a pancake breakfast in the morning where we worked with a local restaurant who gave 2 free pancakes to anyone who came in between 8 and 10 to learn more about mentoring. And so we got a lot of those inquiries that way. But, I mean, gosh, you just have to be really creative. And Laura's right. Once 1 or 2 good mentors come through a business, they're going to do their job, which is to be a program champion and to spread the news for us. It's a lot better, as you guys probably know by now, to have your bigs recruit for you because they can share their real experiences. So, what else? There's some people who haven't shared yet, and I've lost track of who those people are.
Well, I haven't specifically shared. Ours are very similar. We have done some smaller group presentations. We've done large staff meetings. We've done some lunch and learns where we invite people to come in, bring their lunch, and then we share about it there at businesses. Right now we're in the process of really evaluating our list of business and corporate supporters and kind of organizing them into 3 tiers. Those who are very, very well connected with us, those who are pretty well connected, but there's some room for growth either in terms of volunteer enrollment or financial support, and then the smaller group that we have some weak ties with, but we really want to look at strengthening them. So we're doing that to just kind of establish a better plan going forward for each one of those areas. And then also are looking at kind of a similar thing to what you were talking about, Katie, doing kind of a recruitment blitz over the summer when we do kind of our community awareness 100 Days, 100 Bigs campaign, and especially targeting businesses that are around schools that we have higher waiting lists at, kind of narrow down what we'll be doing and just making those individual connections with the businesses and asking to leave information and then potentially following up if they're open to it.
Great. All right, any other thoughts about that one? I see it is 2:50, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll see how we do with that, and then we might have time for another question. So let's see. We have, what are some efficiencies that your agency has found in your enrollment process that maintain program quality and wouldn't be considered cutting corners or focus on quantity versus quality? So essentially what this question is asking, because it was really long, is you know, obviously you don't want to cut corners at any agency. Quality is number 1. But what are some things that you might have found that create more efficient programming, not necessarily cutting corners, but working smarter and not harder? I guess that's a better way to put it. But specifically through your enrollment. So take a minute to think about that. Does anyone want to share any ideas?
I have one. This is Ayla.
Go ahead, Ayla.
Okay. So for our volunteer, I know that we changed it. We have an online interview now. So they inquire online, and then they get that sent to them. They have to go to orientation first, though. And then after that, they can do the interview online instead of in person. And that's really cut off a lot of time. And we found that our answers are actually more honest. Because, you know, you're sitting in front of someone and they're asking you those questions. Most people say what they think you want them, you know, to say.
What the answer is, quote.
Yeah, exactly. So they've been doing that. We still do a home visit, and we kind of check up on some of the questions. But yeah, that's kind of cut some time. And then within, I do inquiries too for child enrollment. And we're working on a child info sheet that I can send to counselors and other school personnel and just other agencies throughout the community, where I can just send out the info sheet, they can read it, get the information, and then decide for themselves if that's what they want. And then usually I get phone calls like I just had for like 45 minutes with the parent, and that's a lot of time for me. So we're going to start sending out an application that they fill out. and then I'll touch base after that. But we want to cut it down to about a 10-minute conversation instead of 45. So.
Great, that's interesting. I hadn't heard of that, but that sounds like a really great change if you're really finding that people are more honest. What else are people doing?
This is Val, and I'm still doing the, the traditional, set. Their inquiry comes in, and you sit and you visit, and you do the. I don't do any training until after I get the background checks back, and then they know that they'll be getting a call, letting them know how everything went, and set a time for orientation for the group. So, still doing traditional stuff.
I'm just curious, is anyone on the call using an online orientation? So you may be like doing reverse of what Central Iowa Big Brothers Big Sisters, they, as we just heard, do the online interview and then the in-person orientation. Is anyone doing the in-person interview and an online orientation?
This is Sarah. We used the online pre-match training previously, but we really prefer to do in-person pre-match training. So even though it can sometimes extend the enrollment process while we're waiting for a volunteer to come into pre-match training, we've also found that we really like that extra layer of having us see them in person in a group setting and really going through it in detail and making sure that there's back and forth and asking questions. So we have probably up until about 3 years ago, we were using it almost exclusively, but we really prefer doing it in person, so we do that now. But we also have very regularly scheduled trainings, and as long as we are comfortable, pretty confident that we're going to accept a volunteer after the in-person interview, we will provide them with the upcoming dates right at the time of the interview so that they can get that on their calendar and get in as soon as possible so that they are getting that finished up while we're doing background checks and references and doing all of our final approvals, and then making sure that and working with the program specialist to enroll a kid and or checking our waiting list. And it's really, our processing from interview to match is at about 8 weeks right now, which really for us is good considering the size of our agency and the number of volunteers we have coming in. So.
Nice. Laura, can you think of anything from our agency that would be good to share?
I apologize. I missed the initial question, but
the question, it was about working harder, not smarter. Working smarter and not harder when it comes to like enrollment. So like not necessarily cutting corners, but like efficiencies that the agencies have found that really help cut down time, but like for good reasons, not because you're cutting quality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, initially, I'm the one who kind of deals with the initial volunteer inquiries. So I, send them their what we call a pre-enrollment questionnaire where they give us their basic information. And then once I get that back, I disperse it to the enrollment staff, and then they follow up with them to kind of explain the program in more detail, answer any questions, and then set up that enrollment interview. And then the lady who was talking before, I apologize, I don't remember her name, but she was talking kind of similar to what our process is with orientation. If we feel pretty confident about the volunteer, we will offer them orientation dates. We do the pre-match training online, but we do it together. So we don't allow them to do it on their own because we also feel that it's important to have, that one-on-one conversations. And sometimes people will bring up good questions that someone didn't think about, so it's good for them to kind of talk with each other about it. And usually we try to shoot for our enrollment process to be about a month. Although since we have been growing and we have gotten a lot more volunteers, it has taken a little longer. So usually we average about 4 weeks to 8 weeks for an enrollment.
Which is pretty strong because just 2 years ago, the agency was averaging a lot longer. So they've done a really good job. Also, I think when Laura does the inquiries and the pre-enrollment questionnaires with our volunteers, she's really setting the pace for the rest of the staff. I think that's one thing that Laura would agree with. When we started to grow, like it was just taking way too long for staff to like reach out to their mentors. And so now with Laura doing it, the program director doing it, is just, she does a good job setting the pace, and she knows when some folks are burdened or feeling stressed or about to take a vacation, so she can kind of make it even out, and it's been good. All right, well, I see it's 2:57. We did ask all the questions that everyone that's listening right now submitted, so hopefully that's your reward by being on this call today. We asked your questions first. We had probably about 7 more questions that we didn't get a chance to talk about. Most were just fundraising, events, things like that, but maybe we could continue to talk offline about those. Is there any other question that maybe those on the call have thought of that they're hoping before we go have a chance to ask? You can either feel free to say it out loud, because this is a safe place, or you can type it in the chat. I haven't seen any other questions coming through, but feel free. I'll pause now and let you guys have your chance to ask another question if you want. All right. Well, I hope that everyone listening was able to get something from today. I learned some things, so I think this is great. We did get some feedback from folks that couldn't join us today that this is a really great topic. Like, they think we should do this more. So we'll probably have another one of these again in the future, just with not really any theme to the call, just an opportunity for people to submit questions before, ask them during, and just hear what people have to say. So I think this was a good topic to pick. Thanks for those who took some time out to contribute, and definitely for the interaction today. This would not have been as fun of a call if people were all on mute the whole time, so I'm glad that everyone got a chance to speak, at least for a few questions. I don't actually know what the topic of our call next month is. Mary, is there a slide about our next call?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you so much.
So next,
ongoing mentor engagement.
Yes, just ongoing training, but just to keep those long-term mentor relationships, keep them thriving, and keep those folks engaged. And I just wanted to reiterate, a lot of these topics today were around elements, and we just covered this for a whole day and had just discussions like this and best practice talk with our elements training, but we could also provide that to any agency on any one of those topics if they'd be interested. And also right now, public health that was part of our training last Friday too. They're doing all those fundraising questions. They're doing a whole series of sustainability. The gal that came on Friday was really great and did a start to that and start to plan, and there'll be a continuation of that on webinars coming up. So if you want any of that information, email me, mary.sheik@iowa.gov. Val, I don't know if you want to add any more to that since you were there last week too.
I think Val's on mute.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, she's off.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, I just wanted to say it was a great training, and you just walked away with so much. It's, what I think I liked the best about it is we had a chart to write down the one thing you're going to do when you get back under each topic, and I think that really helped all of us that was attending. I know that's kind of my Bible now, so I'll remember that. Let's do that. And so I think that was a really good tool, Mary, that you provided for us.
Great, and yeah, I know that people enjoyed the sustainability, the start to that too, and we're looking at logic models now if we haven't started with that before we get moving into. I know it's like we want to get right to the fundraising, to the money, but it's like program sustainability, which goes back to elements, and then just looking at yeah, the whole, then getting into what we're going to do to actually get off and get some funds. So thank you all for participating today, and Katie for leading, and hold on to those other questions too, and we will definitely get burning questions back on the agenda for upcoming topics, but hopefully we'll have all of you engaged again in June. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
everyone. Have a great day. Live the dream.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.